Shawshank Redemption is widely considered one of the best movies ever made. It's a beautiful told story of friendship and hope, both in terms of visual and spoken storytelling. I do love a Morgan Freeman narration. However, the film is also filled with unseen references, interesting behind-the-scenes facts, and maybe even some jokes that went above our heads.
Maybe it's because I'm Irish.
Join us as we take you through 25 facts you maybe didn't know about Shawshank Redemption. Despite being viewed as one of the greatest films of all time, even being number 1 on IMDb's top 250 list, it was actually a flop when it was released. The film's initial gross of $18 million could not even cover the cost of its production cost of roughly $25 million. However, it got some hype at the Oscars as it received 7 nominations, including Best Picture. Although it didn't actually win any Oscars, the nominations managed to boost the film to make another $10 million at the box office. Despite all this, it was still regarded as a box office failure. But let's be fair, this was an extremely competitive year for films, as both Forrest Gump and Pulp Fiction were released in 1994 as well. Morgan Freeman has cited the film's difficult name as major reason for its box office failure, because back then, when there was no internet to speak of, word of mouth played a much bigger role in any film's success than later on. This might be an accurate statement from Freeman, because the following year, Warner Brothers shipped 320,000 rental copies to US video stores, in which allegedly a spokesman admitted was out of whack with the film's performance in theaters. The film became the most rented video of 1995 and one of the highest-grossing video rentals of all time. Word of mouth. Frank Darabont claimed that Goodfellas was a huge inspiration for the creation of Shawshank Redemption. That is especially true for how both films use voiceover narration in showing the passage of time. In fact, Darabont watched it almost every weekend during filming. I'd sit there totally blown out and depressed, and I'd pop in Goodfellas and get inspired again. The main character, Andy, played by Tim Robbins, escaped in 1966, the same year as the landmark Miranda versus Arizona case came before the U.S. Supreme Court. This ruling established that a defendant must be informed of their rights upon arrest. That's why in the film's finale, when Captain Hadley is arrested, the officer reads his Miranda rights from a piece of paper. A funny additional fact here is that Ernesto Miranda, the pivotal man who changed the law of confessions, actually made a living selling autographed Miranda warning cards in downtown Phoenix after he was released from prison. Stephen King received a check of $5,000 for the rights to turn his story into a film. However, he never cashed it. In fact, several years after the movie came out, King got the check framed and mailed it back to Frank Darabont with a note inscribed, "In case you ever need bail money, love, Steve." There's an interesting reference or foreshadowing made by the warden early in the film. When Captain Hadley and Warden Norton trashes Andy's cell checking for contraband, the warden comes across Andy's Bible. The two go on to discuss their favorite verses from the book, and after their brief conversation, the warden says, "Salvation lies within." The warden was probably referring to the idea that spiritual salvation could be found within the pages, but funny enough, Andy had hidden his rock hammer inside the book, which he would use to dig out of prison, giving the warden's comment a double meaning. Harrison Ford, Paul Newman, Gene Hackman, and Clint Eastwood were all considered for the role of Red. Despite the character in the original novel being depicted as a middle-aged white Irishman with red hair, the director Frank Darabont always envisioned Morgan Freeman for the part due to his authoritative presence, demeanor, and deep voice. However, the film included a joke about this. When Andy asked Red why he got his nickname, Red replies the infamous line, "Maybe it's because I'm Irish." This is somewhat of an Easter egg for the Stephen King fans out there. Red's cell number in Shawshank State Penitentiary is 237, revealed when the guards complete a roll call at the start of the day. This is the same number as the guest room at the Overlook Hotel, where Lorraine Massey had died by suicide, an event that played an important part in the narrative of The Shining, which is a movie also based on one of Stephen King's novels. An unlikely coincidence, I would say. A young and unknown Brad Pitt was initially cast in the role of young convict Tommy, but just before Thelma and Louise had come out, suddenly Pitt wasn't so unknown, and he decided to drop out to explore other avenues. Gil Bellows, who was making his film debut, took the role instead. The author of the novel in which the film is based on, Stephen King, has regarded Shawshank as one of his favorite film adaptations of his own work. He also mentioned Rob Reiner's Stand By Me in the same interview, a great coming-of-age film worth giving a watch. Brooks, played by James Whitmore, was the librarian of the prison who often helped Red smuggle goods to the other prisoners. Although not stated in the film, in Stephen King's original novella, Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption, Red says Brooks was sentenced for murder after killing his wife and daughter. Morgan Freeman's son, Alfonso Freeman, had a cameo in the movie as a con shouting, fresh fish today, we're reeling them in." Alfonso was also used for the mugshots of a young-looking Red that are attached to his parole papers. Additionally, a year after The Shawshank Redemption, he appeared as a fingerprint technician in another Morgan Freeman movie, Seven. Andy and Red's first conversation together in the prison yard while Red was tossing a baseball required 9 hours to film. Throughout that time, Morgan Freeman continuously threw the baseball without expressing any complaints. The following day, he arrived for work with his left arm in a sling. As for the role of Andy Dufresne, several other actors were also considered. Darabont firstly aimed for some of his favorite actors, such as Gene Hackman and Robert Duvall, but both unavailable. The role was then offered to Tom Cruise, Tom Hanks, and Kevin Costner. However, all passed on the role. Tom Hanks couldn't accept due to scheduling conflicts with Forrest Gump. Hanks did, however, work on Frank Darabont's next film, The Green Mile. Of course, also an adaptation of a Stephen King novel, which also takes place in a prison. It's obvious that Darabont is a fan of King. He's directed 2 more movies based on King's stories. The previously mentioned The Green Mile was a huge success and even earned some Oscar nominations. The other one, The Mist, has its fans but didn't quite reach the same level of popularity. This was Morgan Freeman's first time narrating a movie, which kickstarted that aspect of his career. We've seen his narration in several films later on, such as $1 Million Baby and War of the Worlds. Unusually, though, the narration was recorded prior to filming and played on set to set the pace for each scene. Freeman recorded the initial track in an Iowa studio in just around an hour. However, there was a slight hiss in the recording in which the Los Angeles sound engineers couldn't remove. As a result, it had to be re-recorded in a professional studio, which took 3 weeks this time. Rob Reiner, who had already adapted King's novel The Body into the film Stand By Me, admired Frank Darabont's script so much that he offered $2.5 million for its rights, with the intention to direct it himself. He envisioned Harrison Ford and Tom Cruise for the roles of Red and Andy. Darabont actually considered Reiner's proposal seriously, but eventually concluded that directing the film himself was his chance to do something really great. He even accepted a reduced salary to secure the opportunity to direct. The $370,000 that Andy stole from the warden in 1966 might not appear a huge amount for nearly 2 decades of imprisonment, but when adjusted for inflation to 2024, it amounts to approximately $3.5 million. During an interview with Fox, Morgan Freeman talked about his favorite movies that he has been in. While many anticipated Morgan Freeman to mention The Shawshank Redemption on the list, he made it clear that the filming process wasn't particularly enjoyable for him. He omitted the movie from his list, stating, "I'm sorry, it's everybody else's favorite, not necessarily mine. I know everybody loves it, and I'm very happy that everybody loves it. I made it. It was a day-to-day thing of shooting it." The 5 films he mentioned was Invictus, Glory, Street Smart, Lean on Me, and Driving Miss Daisy. Frank Darabont preferred to end the film with Red searching for Andy. In fact, if he had been allowed to shoot the ending as he wanted, the closing shot would have been Red on the bus heading for the field. Darabont wanted to end on an open, ambiguous note, but Castle Rock insisted on a reunion between the two to please audiences. So instead of showing us a teary reunion, the film observes it from a distance, Darabont's response to Castle Rock's demands. The look of Shawshank is a big part of its success. You can thank one of the all-time best cinematographers, Roger Deakins, for that. Actually, you can probably also thank Tim Robbins a bit, as it was he who insisted that Deakins should be the DP for the film. Robbins had just worked with Deakins and the Coen brothers on the film The Hudsucker Proxy and was mighty impressed with Deakins' eye for filmmaking. To prepare for his role as Andy Dufresne, Tim Robbins observed caged animals at a zoo, spent an afternoon in solitary confinement, spoke with prisoners and guards, and had his arms and legs shackled for a few hours. Clancy Brown, who portrayed Captain Hadley, mentioned that he got offers from actual corrections officers to assist him in making his portrayal of Hadley authentic. He was considering it, but when he talked to Frank Darabont about it, Darabont advised him to decline the offers. Darabont explained to Brown that the portrayal of Hadley wasn't necessarily about showing him as he truly is, but rather how Andy and Red perceive him, which adds an interesting layer to the character. When preparing The Shawshank Redemption for its home media release, Frank Darabont didn't want to include the deleted scenes. He felt embarrassed by them and opted not to release them to the public. When Andy goes to the library to begin work as Brooks' assistant, he only meets Brooks' crow, Jack. Tim Robbins had to time his line, "Hey Jake, where's Brooks?" so that the crow wouldn't squawk over him, since the bird could not be trained to squawk on cue. Robbins was able to time his line perfectly by learning the bird's squawking patterns. There you have it, 25 facts you now know about The Shawshank Redemption. I hope you enjoyed it, and make sure to leave a comment if there are other facts we missed in this video. As usual, I round up with a random film recommendation. I finally got around to watch Sidney Lumet's Network, an absolute must-watch. Go check it out. Well, that's it for now. I'll talk to you in the next one.